Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm a vice president at Pan Communications in the healthcare portfolio, and I'm here with my fellow healthcare leaders, Dan, Matthew, and Carrie. We're here today to talk about a recent report we put out, HealthPulse, which takes a look at trending conversations within the healthcare space. And we're going to take some time to marry what we found in terms of insights in that report with kind of what we've been seeing and hearing from a client perspective. These guys just got back from the health conference, so we'll talk a little bit about what they observed at the show. And then we'll leverage those insights to talk about what we think is coming up for 2024 and beyond. So guys, with that, I know at HIMSS this year, AI was certainly top of mind. It was considered the hottest topic, and we felt that going into health, this would be the same, and it would still sort of dominate the conversation. Do you think that was the case?
Absolutely. I think we've just scratched the surface of what we're going to see with artificial intelligence. It's amazing. The technology has been around for probably more than a decade. With this most recent facelift with large language models and generative AI, we're seeing companies from startups all the way to enterprise level really engage with the technology and promote it as part of their communications and differentiators out in the market. That is kind of across the continuum from payers to providers to specialists and general practitioners all the way to the patient.
And with so much chatter happening around AI, what tactics do you think brands have and should continue to leverage in order to stand out from the noise?
I'll kick it off. I think it's really kind of the proof is in the pudding, right? We talk a lot about use cases and testimony. The brands that are going to be out in front are those that can thoughtfully test it and promote the impact that the technology is having inside of all those dynamics within healthcare. A lot of the dynamics that our clients work with day in and day out, from health tech to life sciences to biotech. So I think it's those proof points and the progress that's going to be made inside of those testimonies that can validate that these solutions are viable, that they're going to work, that they're going to help achieve companies' goals of achieving that quadruple aim.
Yep.
And I think we're seeing a lot of that now too, where it's been kind of the hype horse with AI's been out of the barn for a while, and we're seeing now real world applications catch up to that hype.
Yeah.
And I think people are really starting to look at, okay, this is real. It's being applied in numerous settings across healthcare. What do we need to do to take like a measured, transparent approach to continue the momentum of AI, but in a safe, equitable, and trustworthy way? So I think that's important. And I think there, to answer your question, some thought leadership can come in. So talking about how do we look at different facets of AI and how do we apply it? And then to Briggsy's point, how do we showcase some of the tangible results and proof points of it?
Yeah, building off of that quickly, I think the hype and the hope of AI continues, right? And we're seeing it come to life. But to what Dan was saying, the continued ethical responsibility that goes along with AI is a growing conversation, and that's where that thought leadership can really come in. So it's not just, and we heard this a lot at Health, and I think it's going to continue to be part of the ongoing industry narrative, not just what can we do, but what should we do in terms of development, and then how does that impact, how do we avoid adding our own bias into these algorithms to make sure we're not, for example, furthering health equity challenges? How do we help versus hurt?
Yep, absolutely. And Matthew, you brought up one point that I just want to spend a little bit more time on, the impact on life sci and pharma. Obviously, we know AI has so much promise for the clinical trial space. And actually, one thing that I've heard anecdotally, which I thought was interesting, was that pharma and life sci had a much bigger presence at Health this year. Can you talk a little bit about if you saw that show up and why that makes sense for those types of brands to have a presence at a digital health show like that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think pharma, biotechs are at a point where they're looking at accelerating, time to market with their drugs and their treatments. I think they're looking at the promise of that technology to accelerate different parts of that value chain, right? If it's from early phase to testing to in-person, right? I think even just on the front end of all that, finding the right kind of patient populations that can qualify for these types of trials and be viable participants to get the results that they're looking for and ultimately move them towards approval and commercial, right? So that's a big part of what we saw.
Yeah, and I think on top of that too, a big thing is just, not to sound redundant, but virtual care and improving virtual care was everywhere at Health and ongoing. And to what Matthew was saying, it's about bringing that care into outside, the traditional space. So bringing care virtually in home can also help with those clinical trials and all that, those patient engagement tools. So they all apply and feed each other. So that's why I think we're seeing more and more of the connection between clinical trials to full medication adherence, right? It's the full life cycle.
Absolutely. Great point, Carrie. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about another topic that we've seen trending immensely over the last few years, which is telehealth. I think one of the insights that we had kind of garnered in our report was that while it is still such a trending topic, the usage of the specific term telehealth has actually gone down a bit, and I think that can be attributed to the fact that they're facing a new normal right now, right? In post-pandemic, there is a big question around what that means for the telehealth market going forward, what it looks like going forward. And so I think that brands, as they're trying to redefine their brand, are potentially leveraging that term specifically a bit less. Can you talk a bit about how you've seen that show up in terms of the redefinition of this market and how that applies to brands?
I think we've seen, I can kick it off. We've seen that term saturate a lot, to your point. So it's becoming virtual care, telemedicine, remote, care monitoring. So there's different pockets and niches that brands have probably, been attracted to make a big difference or to make more of a differentiator in what's a massive opportunity. So we've seen that really play out in the media, in the content marketing programs that we put out, is to really kind of hone their narrative in the place where they know they can make a difference and have that validation in the market. Yeah. And I think where we've seen the growth of telehealth is becoming ubiquitous with care, right? So it's where once, during the throes of the pandemic, it was to survive and to make sure routine care was kept up with. Now we're seeing it thrive in the sense that it can be companion to in-person visits or however you seek your care or transact with your care online or in person. So it's really an interesting time right now where we're kind of moving away from the shadow of COVID and into kind of the next frontier of what virtual care can be.
Yeah, exactly. In addition to the redefinition of telehealth, it's almost like care itself needs to be redefined and is being redefined.
Yeah, I think it's the terminology, right? I think the terms are shifting from telehealth to other things that Matthew mentioned, mostly around virtual care. Mm-hmm. But how that is being delivered is transforming and evolving to be much more inclusive.
Yeah, and I think it is a branding issue in a lot of ways because people think of telehealth as maybe an urgent care visit or a one-off, but in reality, these brands have offerings that look at the whole person, and that's how really the market needs to move in terms of how it's viewed. So, well, speaking of the whole person and the patient experience, I know in HealthPulse we talked a lot about the importance of brands needing to articulate their specific value for the patient itself, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that showed up for you at Health, the patient voice, and in general, how brands can do a better job of bringing that to the forefront.
Yeah, I think as an industry, there's been a lot of movement in terms of how we bring the patient. We've talked a long time about patient-centric, and I think a lot of that has been language, and I think we're now starting to see, conferences included, how can we actually bring that patient voice to the forefront, whether it be through branded opportunities with testimonials, whether it be speaking engagements at conferences, just how do we get those stories front and center? And I think we did see a bit more of that recently at Health, and I think HIMSS has been doing a good job, and a lot of the conferences are doing that. I think when I think about patient experience, it's very holistic and it's very high level. So it's how does a patient engage with all aspects of their care. And I think we're starting to see traditional healthcare companies play a role there, but then we're also seeing a big infusion of big tech and retail companies. We saw a lot of that at the show, all types of brands converging on healthcare to create an experience for patients that mirrors everything else that they're experiencing in their life, whether it's online retail or banking. And how do we facilitate from the beginning to the end of care and outside the hospital walls as well, to monitoring and managing medications outside. Yeah. How do we do follow-up appointments? How do we do physical therapy? All of the things associated with care. All of that is being managed now through technology and innovation to make that experience seamless.
Yep.
And I'll just add to that, I think, as marketers, how that impacts our work is even if you're a brand that sells direct to other, it's a B2B company, you still have a B2B2C message. It still matters how this technology that's being used within a hospital is ultimately helping with patient engagement, patient care, patient outcomes. So part of what we need to do, and we're doing more of, is talking about what's that connection to the patient, even if it's being used by a medical staff.
Yep, absolutely. While we're on the patient experience topic, I'd like to dive into women's health a little bit. Our analysis saw that women's care throughout their life cycle is being paid more attention to by brands. I think in the past we've honed in on specific moments in time, like fertility as an example, but we're seeing brands look at women in a wider lens, as they should. Carrie, do you have any thoughts on both, I think, how that showed up at Health and how brands should be looking at that moving forward in 2024?
Well, obviously, I'm a little biased. I'm interested in Dan's opinion on women's health. But I think it's like you said, it's the full life cycle. And what I love and personally get excited about is women's health is no longer this niche market that's talked about, right? It impacts half of our population. And so many of the other trends that we're seeing, mental health, sleep tracking with wearables, all of these impact women's health. Pediatric health, there's a huge push and there's a natural connection there, right? Health equity, all of these other trends that we're trying to align and create ultimate better outcomes across the board, connect back to women's health. And so it would be a misstep if brands weren't paying attention to this and incorporating that. To what Matthew was saying, when you think about clinical trials, making sure that we're putting out more trials that impact women as well, and look at medication adherence. Everything that we're doing can impact women's health.
Yep, absolutely.
And since you asked, I will give you.
Oh, thank you, Dan.
No, I think I absolutely agree with everything you said. I think if you ladder it up even one more level, and you look at personalized care, right? And it's all about whether male, female. How do you address each patient as an individual, and what can be done for that specific person, because we're all different and our bodies react differently to medications, different treatments. So how do you really personalize that care? And that's something big we're seeing as well.
Absolutely. Dan, I know a topic that you're passionate about is the benefits space. So as we've mentioned topics that have been really relevant to that space, like women's health, like behavioral health, employers have certainly moved to providing more options within those two areas. What do you think is coming up for the benefits space in 2024? What do those leaders need to have top of mind?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think benefits has evolved, and I think it's easier to start with employers because more than 55% of Americans get their health coverage through their employer, right? But I also think you look at payers in terms of plan design and how those two groups work together to provide people what they're looking for. I think right now where you're seeing benefits a little bit outside of healthcare is more of like a strategic weapon for employee retention and attraction, right? And how can we as employers offer the best benefit package that is going to bring the best talent and keep the best talent, right?
Yeah.
So putting that aside, I think when you start to look at what some of those aspects are around mental health, overall wellness, nutrition, all of those things that are part of it, to me, the thing that stands out is where the industry is going is much more on the preventative care side.
Yeah.
So how do we get ahead of certain chronic conditions, illnesses, diseases by living better, by looking more holistically at our health, wellness, nutrition, sleep, all of these things, and address them before they become a significant problem, both from a health, productivity, and a cost standpoint. So I think we're going to see more of that.
Yep, absolutely. You can't talk about benefits without talking about behavioral health, as I mentioned earlier. So, Carrie, I know you have a really cool client in that space that's been talking a lot about a lot of the topics that we've touched on already this year. What do you think is coming up for 2024, and what do behavioral health brands need to keep top of mind to stay within the conversation?
Yeah, I think that what I love when we go to conferences and just talking with others in the industry, it's very clear that the stigma has really lessened post-COVID, but I think it is accepted that the care that we take for our bodies, we need to equally take that care for our minds. And so looking at a person holistically, right? And I think there's the day-to-day mental health, tying back to what Dan was saying about the culture of a company. Those are in culture and mental health are intrinsically linked. But additionally, the severe chronic cases, the true, suicidal ideation cases that we're looking at, those are the cases that are costing our healthcare industry the most money, and we need to focus there as well. I think that we are seeing a lot of brands really pay attention to day-to-day maintaining your health, getting the therapy through, mental health services and telehealth, but how do we also address those really severe cases? And I think that we're seeing that grow a lot more. And also, again, the stigma continuing and the connection back to benefits.
You mentioned stigma. That to me is something that it's been really interesting in that space. And that is, if you go back even 5 years, which is scary to say, but 5 years, there was a huge stigma associated with mental health. And I think those barriers and walls have been broken down. And I think it's part of the mainstream fabric of healthcare in society to be talking more about those as well. So I think from a brand standpoint, if there are patients you can bring forth, if there are doctors, clinicians that can be talking more about it, and how do we continue to make that more mainstream, and as a group and a society talk about how do we continue to address it and what else needs to be, what other needs are out there that need to be met.
Yep. No, that's a great point, Dan. One other thing I wanted to touch on is interoperability, and I know that's a topic that we've been discussing at major shows for many, many years now. Matthew, curious your perspective on how the conversation's evolved. Are we seeing the benefit come to fruition yet? And where do you think that conversation's going to go in 2024? I know our analysis in particular showed that there are spikes in that conversation around major shows, so curious how that showed up at Health this year.
Yeah, I think in a big way we saw the move from information sharing to intelligence and insights, right? So we've been talking about, brands have been talking about their unique ability to translate information, patient data, into actionable information, both for plans and payers and providers themselves, and for patients themselves as well, right? That we can use our own data to inform the environment that we live in and the health regimen that we take on for ourselves, right? So I think where we'll see a lot of movement for interoperability is that broader care collaboration, in network, right? Where we're seeing greater trust in data in the sense that it's going to give us the insights that we need to make the right kind of actions when we need to make them. And that's across the whole spectrum and continuum of healthcare. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think those are some great points. And, in general, based on our analysis and based on what we've seen throughout the year, we went into health thinking that AI was going to be the biggest topic this year, right? And I think we were right in our prediction there. But curious what you all think is going to be the biggest topics at Vive and HIMSS this year, which will be back-to-back in Q1.
Yeah, I'll start.
Okay.
I think building off what you just said around AI, 100% AI still is going to be
absolutely
at the forefront in terms of we've taken steps forward already. How does it continue to evolve? How does it continue to get integrated? How does it continue to build trust and gain credibility in the market?
And who are the winners in that space, right, too? Because everyone's talking about it.
People talking about AI. Totally true.
Yeah.
Great point. That for sure. I think we talked a little bit about patient engagement in patient experience. I still think putting the patient at the center and how do we create an environment and an experience for them throughout the whole healthcare continuum for them and their journey that is seamless, that is easy, that is user-friendly, that results in better quality of care for them, and then also some of those peripheral benefits for payers, providers, and employers that go along with that. So those are two I'm interested in checking out.
Absolutely. Carrie?
I think, the continued focus on the accessibility and affordability of mental health will stay top of mind. And, I think that that's critical over these next few shows. I think in particular with Vive, that's a pretty startup-heavy show. There's a lot of new innovations that are coming out. So I hope to see, again, bias, but there was a lot of discussion at Health about more women-led companies. And I think so hopefully we'll see more women's health companies coming out with some innovations. And I think collectively and Matthew mentioned this, but All of this, right, is creating more data for us to analyze and interpret and garner insights from. And so the discussion of how we can really take actionable insights from data across all these different, the entire healthcare ecosystem will be an ongoing discussion.
Love that. Matthew?
I think we're going to see, might not be a topic of discussion at these conferences, but we're going to really kind of feel the weight and kind of the wait and see of what the funding environments are going to look like, what the IPO and public markets are going to look like in healthcare in particular, with kind of that long shadow of what's going to happen with the economy, right? I think we're going to see brands really double down on the value proposition through their communications, through their marketing, and talk about the real life, real world value that they're going to be able to achieve, be it through their point solution, through their platform. So in that way, they're kind of proving to the world, proving to investors maybe, proving to their prospects and their customers that they are the right kind of solution, that they have the right approach. We're going to see a lot more due diligence, I think, in the message and the narrative coming into the early part of next year that really emphasizes and digs into that from a value proposition standpoint to maybe seek that next round that they're looking for, or whatever that exit might be, I think, to put themselves in position for success.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson for us, if you guys agree, in 2023 was that brands needed to listen and be nimble with their marketing strategies based off of those observations and insights. And I think that will still ring true in 2024. So
absolutely. I think brands are going to look at this conference circuit to kind of assess what worked, the results that they put in from a marketing dollars, from a sales perspective, right? And really kind of put those insights into practice for what's ahead into 2024.
Yeah.
And just building off one thing you said there, Briggsy, in terms of macroeconomic and industry trends, topics, I think it'd be interesting to watch the M&A market, right? Because I think there's going to be more of a shift. We're already seeing it, specifically within the provider environment, from point solutions to more of a platform. And how do companies, bigger, more established companies, look to go to Vive and look at potential prospects at Vive and other shows that are smaller that they can maybe bring in through acquisition and help to build out more of that robust ecosystem versus these point solutions.
Absolutely. No.
And then how do brands then communicate that in terms of the value proposition and their growth and acquisition strategies will be a big part too.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a good place to close it out. Thank you guys for the conversation. And for any brands watching, take a look at our HealthPulse report for some deeper insights on the topics that we discussed today. And be on the lookout for future iterations as we approach HIMSS and Vive in the next year. Thank you.